Have you ever been blamed for something you didn't do, and no one would even listen to your side of the story? What if the world judged you just for being who you are? This is the story of Jamal Carter, a quiet, thoughtful 12-year-old boy who dreamed of becoming an architect. But one cold morning, in the heart of a town that had tried to forget its past, he was thrown out of his school, humiliated, heartbroken, all because of a lie. What no one knew, not even Jamal, was that his bloodline carried something powerful, something that would shake the walls of the school and change everything. It was a brisk Monday morning in Concord, Georgia. The kind of morning where the frost lingered on the grass and kids dragged their backpacks like anchors. Inside the polished halls of Old Pine Academy, an elite, mostly white private school, Jamal Carter kept his head down as he walked past the trophy case. He could feel the eyes. Some watched with curiosity, others with something colder. He was the only black student in his grade. Jamal wasn't just smart. He was brilliant. Sketchbooks filled with futuristic cityscapes lined his room. He could calculate angles in his head. But that didn't matter here. At Old Pine, who your father was or wasn't seemed to matter more than what you could do. He slid into his homeroom seat quietly. Miss Sutherland took attendance with her usual sharp tone. Then it happened. A loud shout echoed from the hallway. A door slammed. Seconds later, Vice Principal Graves stormed in, holding a broken window frame. "Who did this?" he barked, holding up the shattered piece of glass. "We found this in the courtyard. And someone left this behind." He held up a navy blue hoodie, Jamal's. His initials, JC, were stitched in silver on the sleeve. Whispers. The eyes in the room turned to him like knives. "That's not mine," Jamal said softly. I didn't." "Come with me," Graves interrupted. "Now." They didn't ask questions. They didn't check cameras. Within the hour, Jamal was expelled. No due process. No warning. No investigation. His mother, Tanya, rushed into the school office in a panic. "You're expelling my son for a broken window." "He wouldn't. He couldn't do something like that." Graves stared at her coldly. "The evidence is clear. We found his hoodie, and he was the only student in the area." Tanya shook her head, eyes wet with fury. "Did you even check if he was there?" But Principal Alan Monroe, a balding man with a tired smile, stood silent behind his desk. "Ma'am, the decision is final." Jamal didn't say a word. He just stared at the framed photo behind Principal Monroe's desk. The school founders, every face in black and white, everyone white. As they walked out into the cold, Jamal broke. "Mama, I didn't do it." She knelt and hugged him. "I know, baby. I know you didn't." But knowing wasn't enough. Not here. That evening, Tanya sat at the kitchen table, her face buried in her hands. The rent was already 2 weeks late. She cleaned houses part-time and took night shifts at the local diner. Getting Jamal into Old Pine had been a miracle, a scholarship she fought tooth and nail for. And now it was gone. "Maybe I'll just go to the public school," Jamal said quietly, poking at his untouched mashed potatoes. But his grandfather, Samuel Carter, sitting quietly in his rocking chair, suddenly straightened. "Not a chance," he said, voice low and steady. "You're not running from injustice. We face it." Jamal looked up. "Grandpa, they don't care." Samuel leaned forward. "I've seen what happens when you let people get away with this. When I was your age, I had to walk 5 miles to a school that told me I didn't belong. But I walked anyway. And I stayed. And I spoke. You hear me?" Jamal nodded slowly. His grandfather rarely talked about the past. Tanya watched the exchange with a strange emotion in her eyes. Pride and worry. "I'm going back up there," Samuel said. "To that school." Tanya sighed. "Daddy, please. They don't care who you are." Samuel's eyes twinkled. "Maybe it's time they find out." The next morning, Principal Monroe walked into his office and froze. Sitting calmly in his chair was Samuel Carter, dressed in a pressed brown suit, a weathered leather folder in his lap. "I hope you don't mind," Samuel said. "Your secretary let me in." Monroe tried to summon a smile. "Mr. Carter." Samuel opened the folder. Inside was a black and white photograph. 1964. Selma, Alabama. A young black man, fists raised, surrounded by state troopers. A headline: "Local teen leads peaceful march." Then, another photo. The same man, now older, shaking hands with President Johnson. Presidential commendation. You're that Samuel Carter," Monroe whispered. Samuel nodded. "I didn't come here to talk about the past. I came for my grandson." Monroe swallowed. "Mr. Carter. I didn't know." "That's the problem," Samuel said, eyes burning. "You didn't know who he was. So you assumed the worst." There was silence. Samuel leaned forward. "You want to teach values at this school? Start by fixing this." That afternoon, Monroe called an emergency staff meeting. He announced that a formal investigation would be opened, that all available camera footage from the courtyard would be reviewed. Jamal's name was not to be spoken until the truth came out. By morning, the footage told a different story. It wasn't Jamal. It was Ryan Caldwell, a boy from a wealthy family who had thrown the rock in a tantrum. When confronted, Ryan admitted it. He'd taken Jamal's hoodie from his gym locker. As a joke. Monroe stood in front of the entire school during morning assembly. "We owe one of our own a public apology," he said, voice shaking. "Jamal Carter was innocent." Silence. Jamal stood in the back of the gym, eyes wide, heart thudding. Then, Monroe did something no one expected. He stepped down from the podium and handed Jamal his hoodie back, in front of everyone. "I'm sorry, son." Jamal nodded, not quite smiling. But something had shifted. Later that day, a quiet buzz filled the school halls. Some students, the ones who had ignored him, now stopped Jamal to talk. One girl handed him a note. "I'm really sorry. I should have said something." Another boy from the basketball team, Trey, slapped a hand on his shoulder. "Hey man, that was messed up. But you're still here. Respect." It wasn't everything, but it was something. Later that week, Trey invited Jamal to lunch. And the table that once seemed like a fortress opened up. 1 week later, Jamal returned home with a surprise letter. Embossed seal. The National Center for Civil Rights Education. "Dear Jamal Carter," it read. "Your grandfather's story, and now yours, have inspired us." Jamal had been invited to speak, along with his grandfather, at the center's annual youth forum in Atlanta. That night, Jamal stood on stage, heart pounding, looking out at a room of hundreds. "My name is Jamal Carter," he said, voice steady, "and I almost let one moment define me. But my grandfather taught me something. When people try to erase you, you stand taller. You speak louder. And you remind them where you come from." The room erupted in applause. Samuel wiped a tear. Tanya hugged them both. Soft piano returns. Sometimes it takes just one person, one act of kindness, one moment of courage, to break through the walls built by fear and ignorance. For Jamal Carter, it took being expelled to finally be seen. And for a school once blind to its past, it took a grandfather's legacy to open its eyes. What would have happened if Samuel never walked through those doors? Can you imagine what's possible when we stand up not just for ourselves but for each other? Voice softens. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever witnessed an act of kindness that changed everything? Like, subscribe, and watch our next story, about a young janitor who cleaned a courthouse until the judge found out she once saved his life. Because sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest truths.